Hi, Charlotte.
Hello again, Rabbi.
Yeah, long time no see. Go back to our text for a moment. I'll be with everybody in a moment. I'm just looking up a couple things here. Hi, Maddie. Hi, Carol.
Hi,
Hello. Carol, what's the title of the picture above your head?
The title?
Does it say?
No, it was in my parents' house and I fought my brother for it. Yeah, because I love it. It's the artist is the last name is Shepherd. That's all it says.
Uh-huh.
I mean, maybe it says something in the back. I could look.
Don't look. No, don't take it down.
No, I'm not taking it.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. No, I got a couple of things from their house that
It's like she's a flower lady. It looks like those are flowers.
yeah, yeah. No, it's a pretty picture. It's
Mm.
I like it. Yeah. So, so we're all set for I mean, I got fruit, pineapple, hopefully, but I'll probably go in on Friday and just cut the pineapple on Friday, let it ripe for another day. It's small. A small pineapple. Okay.
It's okay, but
Hey, Hoodie.
sometimes there's leftover anyway.
Yeah. It'll be okay.
Okay, we're going to get started. Let me bring the text forward. Let me try this one more time correctly. Oh. Um, and let me that should be a little bit better.
Okay.
It could be a little bit bigger. I would have to.
Let,
No, it's barely outside.
Yeah, well, you can maybe make it bigger.
Barely.
wait, let me see actually.
Doing it on my phone.
Yeah, this is what I want. Yeah, this is what we normally do. Okay, so again, as we continue through Sefer Bereshit, we're going to be looking at the Haftarot. Not that there isn't a lot in the parasha. Of course, here we have Joseph having his dreams and really drawing the ire of his brothers who plot to kill him, but then at the end decide, no, well, let's make some money off the deal. And they sell him into slavery. A little bit of an interesting conflation there of he's being sold to, Ishmaelites or Midianites. Um, and at any point, we know that he ends up in Egypt, in the home of Potiphar, where he is exceedingly successful until his Potiphar's wife has eyes for him, and then, when he refuses her advances, she falsely accuses him. He ends up in prison, and there in prison, he also does very, very well. And he's in charge of all the prisoners, and there he interprets dreams of the cupbearer, Sar HaMashkim and Sar HaAfot. And as he predicted, the dreams come true, but he is forgotten. Also, in the midst of all of this, while we're focusing on Yosef, we also find out what's happening back in the home of Yaakov and Eretz Canaan, and we have that unusual story of Yehuda and his daughter Tamar. So, a lot going on in the parasha. But we have relatively short haftarah, but a very powerful haftarah. Unfortunately, in some ways, it picks up in the middle. So, looking at the beginning words of the haftarah, would somebody like to read?
I'll read.
Thank you, Maddie.
Thus said Hashem, for 3 transgressions of Israel, for 4 I will not revoke the decree, because they have sold for silver those whose cause was just, and the needy for a pair of sandals.
Okay, stop before you go on. This is one of the major reasons that this haftarah was chosen, because we have the brothers selling Joseph. Okay, go on.
You who trample the heads of the poor into the dust of the ground, and make the humble walk a twisted course. Father and son go to the same woman, and thereby profane my holy name.
By the way, that's a little bit of a hint as well to what happens with Yehuda and Tamar. Go on.
They recline by every altar on garments taken in pledge, and drink in the house of their God wine brought with fines they imposed.
So clearly, just before we go any further, what are the sins that Amos is accusing Yisrael of having committed? What kinds of sins?
Sexual advancements
Sexual,
and what else? Drinking. That they should.
drinking, but not only drinking. What are they drinking?
Holy wine.
Possibly holy wine, but more so, where did the wine come from?
The main deal here is social justice with a little bit of, sexual improprieties thrown in.
Yeah,
It's the sexual impropriety is not the main thing here.
Right.
The main thing is a corrupt society. In a
Exactly.
corrupt society, anything goes. Okay.
right. So, and again, the wines they bought with fines they imposed. In other words, they imposed these fines on people, unfairly. They trample the heads of the poor, make the humble walk a twisted course. They force people into behaving improperly. They're taking advantage of the poor and, monetarily uh, taking advantage over them. Again, as Yodi said, these are all laws of social justice. Now, this is, as I said, picking up in the middle of a much longer section, which we'll come back to. But first, let's look. Can you see my page here? Okay, good.
Those are,
One moment. Let me just get out of here for a second. I can't make this any larger. This is on Sfaria, and I'm going back to the beginning of Amos. You know, our Haftarah picks up in the second chapter, and let's take a look at a couple of oops, got a couple of people coming in here. Hi, Rabbi Zucker, where are you? Hi, Stephanie.
Hello, Rabbi. Hi, everyone.
how you feeling?
I'm okay, thank you. Slowly but surely getting there.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Rabbi
take
Zucker told me,
Yes,
he was trying to get into the class.
Rabbi Zucker, are you still trying to get into the class?
I'm in now.
Ah,
Finally,
excellent,
finally.
excellent.
Thank you.
Okay, perfect. All
Okay,
right.
thanks,
Stephanie.
Stephanie.
Just wanted to check that out. All right,
Yep.
thank you so much.
She's so tech savvy.
Yeah.
Even with a walker, I can still make it over here. and do it.
All right, yeah.
All right, thank you. Enjoy.
Take care. Okay. So, we saw the beginning of our Haftarah that says, Ko amar Adonai al shlosha pishei Yisrael va'arba'a lo ashivenu. Thus says Adonai, for 3 transgressions of Israel, for 4 I will not revoke the decree. That's just the translation here. But take a look at what we have here in verse 3 in the first chapter of Amos. Maddie, would you like to read it?
Thus said God, for 3 transgressions of Damascus, for 4 I will not revoke the decree.
And then they, talked about what they did. They threshed Gilead. Okay, let's go down to verse 6.
Thus said God, for 3 transgressions of Gaza, for 4 I will not revoke the decree, because they exiled an entire population, which they delivered to Edom.
Yeah, sorry, I hate to say it. I mean, there's just a part of me that wants to say karma's a bitch. That's, really rude of me. Anyway, going on to verse 9.
Thus said God, for 3 transgressions of Tyre,
Mhm.
for 4 I will not revoke the decree, because they handed over an entire population to Edom, ignoring the covenant of brotherhood.
Yeah, so we're here getting the sins of these other countries, which all seem to involve national interests. They're, standing idly by while they're B'nai Brit, the members of their covenant, other nations are suffering. And here we have in verse 11.
Thus said God.
I think you have to see here what's going on up till where Yehuda and Israel
Yeah. Let's just
are
get
war
there.
crimes. They're not the same type of crimes that Yehuda and Israel are being accused
Yeah,
of.
let's get there first.
I
That-
thought we were.
No,
That's
I'm going through all of these so people
Okay.
understand.
Saying like making it sound like these are just regular sins, and these are not sins. These are crimes, and they are basically war crimes as well.
Yeah, right. Exactly. But that's crucial to recognize that. And let's go on to here, verse 13, Maddie, go on.
Thus said God, for 3 transgressions of the Ammonites, for 4 I will not revoke the decree, because they ripped open the pregnant women of Gilead in order to enlarge their own
In
territory.
other words, they gave them over to rape and pillage, et cetera, et cetera. And then, so all of these nations going on here.
Thus said
Verse
God,
12.
for 3 transgressions of Moab, for 4 I will not revoke the decree, because he burned the bones of the king of Edom to lime.
Yeah, so okay, all these horrible war crimes, as Yehudi put it, all these nations are guilty of, and God is going to punish them. And you can imagine the Israelites hearing this and thinking, "Yeah, you go, God. Like punish all of these nations that are surrounding us." Then we get to verse 4 here.
Thus said God, for 3 transgressions of Yehuda. For 4 I will not revoke the decree, because they have spurned the teaching of God and have not observed divine laws. They are beguiled by the delusions after which their ancestors walked.
Just read one more line.
I will send down fire upon Yehuda, and it shall devour the fortresses of Jerusalem.
Yeah. Okay. So now this might be less uncomfortable. Remember, Amos, together with Hosea, is prophesying in the north. So great. He's talking about how God is going to punish all these nations round about. Then suddenly it gets a little closer to home, literally, because he's talking about the transgressions of Yehuda. I'm also going to punish Yehuda. And as Yehudi mentioned, we're not talking about war crimes. We're not talking about abandoning treaty partners. Here, we're talking about turning against God. So that might
Another point should be that this also goes with the rah-rah God, because at this point, Yehuda and Israel are basically not getting along very well.
right.
Yo's running Yehuda, Yoram Hashini is running Israel. There's skirmishes along the border all the time. And basically, when he goes and zaps Yehuda, he's just adding to the list of nations that the northern Israelites would love to hear getting zapped.
Yeah. But you know, you can still it's probably they're probably a little bit more uneasy when God is talking about Yehuda and Dafka talking about crimes against God, not war crimes. So that takes us to our
Before you continue,
yeah.
when we studied this in Los Angeles with Stanley Gewurz, he made the point that the structure of 3
We're going to get to that in a moment.
crimes, that is typical Canaanite poetry. You see that from Rosh Shamra, from Ugaritic material, and in effect, despite Amos saying, I'm not a prophet and I'm a dresser of sycamore trees, he's got an Oxford education
Yes.
in diction, etc. This is highfalutin language of the day.
Okay, and now we'll see. First of all, just an introductory comment by Fishbane. Maddie, you can continue here.
The Haftorah opens with an indictment of Israel for its transgressions. It is preceded by indictments against 6 surrounding nations and the southern kingdom of Judah.
Yeah, so that's what we just read. So we got
Right.
the background.
The rhetorical pattern throughout is to open with the statement, thus said the Lord, for 3 transgressions of X, for 4 I will not revoke it, and continue with the arraignment.
Yeah, which is what we saw. Now, a little bit more on that from the wonderful commentary on Amos. I don't have the latest commentary, which there's one in Mikra Yisrael, the Israeli series, but this is a big fancy schmancy series of commentaries from Armenia. This is by my teacher and Yehudi's Chavruta, Shalom Paul.
This
Wonderful.
is basically the two are very close to each other. Like you pointed out about Yepetz Tere. I mean, in other words, they're not like 2 separate enterprises. The Hermetia English is very similar to the Mikra Yisrael Hebrew.
Yeah. Well, actually, even in some cases, the JPS Bible commentary is very similar because they've translated some of those into Hebrew from Mikra Yisrael. So, and you know, probably vice versa, they'll end up translating some of Mikra Yisrael for JPS. Okay, so keep going here with what Shalom Paul of Shalom, he just died recently, has to say about this structure.
What then is the purpose and meaning of the 3-4 pattern here? Weiss's statement that this type of composition, not being a creation ex nihilo, was yet an ad hoc one?
Yeah, yes.
Is correct.
Okay, let me just unpack that a little bit. There are a couple of very important articles in the past, one by Mayor Weiss, another one by Zakovich. Amos mentions them in his notes. And so does Fishbane, I think, about who wrote about these patterns in biblical texts, and particularly in Amos. So, on one hand, Amos is quoting Weiss, said that, this type of composition was not created out of nothing. Precisely what Rabbi Zucker was saying, that this is a well-known pattern.
And it's just
Uh,
not just 3-4. It's 1-2. It's
It's
2-3.
Oh,
X,
yeah,
X
yeah,
plus
there-
one. It's
It's
X plus
5-6.
one.
It's 6,
For 6,
7,
for
and
7.
it's 7-8. It's called
Yeah,
plus 1.
X plus one.
Yeah, we're going to
Yeah.
come to that. Amos makes that point. So, it is, on one hand, he's drawing on the models, the existent models of the ancient Near East. On the other hand, he's adding his own shtick, his own bit. So, go on, Maddie. Amos,
Amo- Amos wanted to state as poignantly as possible that the transgressions enumerated were the most vile, abominable, and despicable of all, thereby causing God to intervene directly and execute punishment. It thus was, in a real sense, the complete sin. However, it is neither the last of 4 crimes, the one which tips, indeed overloads the scale. Not does it imply that Amos does not itemize the first 3 crimes, but rather jumps to the 4th.
Yeah, I don't know if I typed that incorrectly, but basically, it's not just that the fourth is the worst. Weiss felt that in the patterns was the last one that was the worst, that tips the scale. And he points out that Amos does, in fact, itemize some of these other crimes. Okay, here's how the Shalom Paul explains it.
Rather, it is to be understood as a novel, poetical way by which the prophet expresses the concepts of totality and climax. He resorts to the use of the typological number 3 and its functional parallel 4 in order to signify completion. This numerical pattern of 3-4 is also well attested elsewhere as designating a climactic nature. Amos is thus employing the literary scheme 3-4 in the same manner as he uses 7-8, the number of oracles. That is, both 3 and 7 are typologically complete numbers, for which 4 and 8 provide the complementary numerical parallelism and also add a climactic dimension.
Yeah, so there's a whole powerful rhetoric here that normally we think of, oh, yes, there are 3. Oh, yes, there are 7. But no, he's going to add one more, and that's going to go, whoa, that comes as kind of a shock because we don't necessarily expect it. And we have it within these different oracles that we have, al shlosha pishay, whatever, val arba'ah, 3 and 4. But then we have 7 oracles, and then the 8th one is Israel. So, and Fishbane and Paul point out how this is used in other places in the Bible. And I think not always just in poetry, but sometimes even in prose, when you're expecting something, normally it's number 7. 7 is the crucial one. But then there's an 8th. So one of the great surprises, perhaps, is in books of Shmuel, when Shmuel goes to anoint the king. In this case, it's going to be David, but he gets all of the sons of Jesse. And there are 7 of them, but it's none of them. But it's David who's the 8th. So it creates a certain sense of power, like, oh, we would expect 7, we'd expect 3. But it's when you get the 4 that, whoa, that comes as a shock. 8, that comes as a shock. And for those who remember Monty Python, no one expects the Spanish Inquisition. So if you get that, great. If not, don't worry about it. Okay, so coming back to the transgressions.
Me?
We just read this. And this is powerful because it is social injustice. And that is very much Amos's concern. And in many ways is a concern of the 8th century prophets. Other prophets have, it's not that they don't care about social justice, they certainly do, but that's not necessarily the focus of all of their prophecies. Like Yechezkel does not focus on social justice. You know,
And
he
neither
is,
does Hosea.
yeah, neither does Hosea. Hosea, certainly not. You know, a lot of them are concerned with crimes against God. Now, also commenting on the understanding of Al Shlosha Pishay Yisrael, you know, yeah, Al Michram Kesef Tzadik. They sell a righteous person for money, or they translate it here. They have sold for silver those whose cause was just. An interesting
It
comment.
would be better to say innocent person. That's not a good translation at all. You know, tzaddik doesn't have to mean righteous person.
Correct. Yeah, those whose cause was just. Yeah, that's a better translation than. So there's an interesting commentary here by Barbanel, and I'm sorry I did not have a chance to translate it.
Don't look at me.
Okay, now I'll take this one. Ko amar Adonai al shashat pishay Yisrael v'gomer, etc. So you know he's commenting on this. Says Chochmei hanotzrim chashvu la'asot ra'aya menubuah hazot al inyan datam. The scholars of Christianity tried to, or intended to use this as proof from this prophecy regarding the matters of their faith. Ufershu al shalosha pish'ei Yisrael, and they explained, you know, in the 3 sins of Israel, Kemoshe Perashti ani al avodah zara v'gilui arayot ushvichut damim, that just as I explained that these refer to the 3 sins of idolatry, sexual immorality, and the shedding of blood, shahayu b'neihem, that existed among them, v'sha'arvi'i she'alav amar v'al arba'a lo ashivenu, and for 4 I will not recant, huma shebi'er al michram b'kesef tzadik, that what explained all, they sold the person whose cause was just for silver. Shezeh haya Yeshu, hanotzri. This was Jesus. Aval tshuvat riatam, because remember, if you remember, that Judah, interestingly, the one who betrayed Jesus, he did it for 30 pieces of silver. Aval tshuvat rayatam mevueret mishnei ofanim. However, the answer to their proof can be explained in 2 ways. Harishon, she'aparasha hazot lo ne'emra ki im al malchut Yisrael, lo al Yehuda v'Yerushalayim. First of all, this prophecy was said about the kingdom of Israel, not on Judah and Jerusalem. She'aleha ba'a parasha bifnei atzma lamala, because they were at its own pericope, its own section above. We saw that he already had a section against Judah. V'yaduahu eslam, and they themselves know she'inyan Yeshua Notzri lo haya b'bayit rishon biyot hamalchiyot chalukim. You know that Jesus was not about the first temple when the kingdoms were separated. Avalaya b'vayit sheni was talking about Second Temple times. Ukfar malchut Yisrael haya gula velo nityaches oto maaseh. What's the kafalef here, gentlemen? Help me. And he did not relate to the action of
Kamar. Klomar.
No, I would
Ki'im.
Ki'im.
Ki'im
Right, yeah, Ki'im,
B'nai
yes.
Yehuda.
Yeah, but it was talking about Judah. Not, he
Im
wasn't
B'nai
relating.
Yehuda.
Yeah, he wasn't relating at all to the kingdom of Israel, but to Judah. Ve'im hayu hanivuot ha'ela ne'amrot al bait rishon. And if all of these prophecies were said regarding the first temple, ef shar imkein lefaresh alav al michram bekesef tzaddik. You cannot. It's impossible to apply them to the selling of an innocent person, or a person whose cause was just, for money. Kilo haya adayin yeshu b'yamim. Jesus didn't even live in those times. V'im yifarshu ha'nevuot ha'elu al bayit sheni, and if you want to apply the these prophecies to the second temple, hine b'farashat Yehuda haya ra'ui lizkor inyano ki beinehem na'aseh ma'asehu. Lo b'parashat Malchut Yisrael shegalu kodem lechein. Yoter meitav kaf shana. Sorry.
500 years.
Yeah, it's the basically this was not a matter for them, because the kingdom of Israel had already been exiled for hundreds of years. So, it just didn't, this prophecy was delivered to the northern kingdom. First of all, it wasn't delivered to the southern kingdom. The northern kingdom was no more. There's no way this could be talking about the time of Jesus. והאופן השני מהתשובות שמכרם בכסף צדיק הוא, and I lost my place a second. And the way these two answers regarding this interpretation of this verse, Kamov Evyon Ba'avur Na'alaim, and the poor person for a pair of sandals, Himatzei B'Sifreihem Shenimkar Yeshu Anotzri Ba'avur Na'alaim. That's
You
not
do
in their
realize,
book.
Rabbi Papi, that that abbreviation sign on Yeshu is meant to make it an abbreviation for Yimach Shemo B'Zichro.
Oh, okay. כשאתה נמצא לזה הנביא עצמו, ששנה נבואה זו אחר זו באומרו, שימוזות השואפים אביון וגומר, לקנות בכסף דלים ואביון בעבור נעליים. The prophet himself uses this example many times. הנה התפאר שלא אמר זה על אדם רשום ידוע. He didn't write this over any specific marked person, any well-known, distinguished person. Ki'im al dalim rabim, but on many poor people, shayu matin et dinam mipnei shochad hakesef, that whose judgment was perverted because of bribe, shochad hakesef, because of monetary bribe, o ba'avor na'alayim.
Of
Or
course,
for,
this argument bounces back on us because we're choosing this Haftarah because of Yosef.
right.
So
Yeah.
we're singularizing it too. It's just a
Mhm.
question of who we're singularizing about.
Yeah,
We're not going to believe that Amos is really zapping the people in the north because of the sale of Yosef
Joseph, right.
1,000 years before. So our particular way of taking the Haftarah isn't any better than theirs, but our Barbanel is not going to admit that.
Yeah.
But Abarbanel is really talking for the Jewish community because the church would have seen this in the same way of Ein Mugdam ve'Ein Muchar.
Right.
And they would have seen it nonetheless.
Yeah. We'll come back to that in a moment, because these are great points. Let me just finish this. Ulechein Amar Amos Lignot Bekesef Dalim Lashon Rabim. He used the plural form of the poor. V'naniach inyan hazeh ki hu batel me'atzmo. And we'll leave this matter because it is nullified on its own. But as Yehudi said, yeah, it's just one to see how the commentator is dealing with his own times, and Abarbanel was an advisor to Ferdinand and what's her face?
Isabella.
He was an
Isabella, yeah.
advisor to the King of Portugal, then moves over to Ferdinand and Isabella, ends his career as a diplomat for the Duke of or the Doge of Venice.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if there's ever a man who can speak about royalty and what goes on in high politics, he is it.
Yeah. There is a great biography, which I've yet to read, on Abarbanel by, of all people, Netanyahu's father, who was a great historian.
Netanyahu, yeah, it is great. It's JPS
Yeah,
published.
I read
Yeah,
it
JPS
3 years
published.
ago,
Yeah, it's from many, many years ago.
35 years ago.
You know, Ben-Zion Netanyahu, I mean, that Benjamin Netanyahu was an intelligent guy, you know, he comes by it honestly. Father
Indeed.
was a great historian. So you know, that is interesting. Also, a couple of other points. One, it's true. We struggle with element. You know, we try and apply the Tanakh to a much wider scope than what may be indicated within the pshat of the biblical text. We do that all the time. We talked about last week about eschatology and you know how many of the words of the prophets are being used to describe what happens in the far future. Ba'achrit hayamim. We're going to come up at the end of Bereshit. The word achrit hayamim, the end of days, doesn't mean the eschaton, doesn't mean literally the end of days, but you know, in the future. But then within our tradition, that gets interpreted messianically, and you know, they do the same thing in Christianity. And it's important to recognize that when Christianity and Judaism each read Tanakh, we're not necessarily reading the same book because we are reading Tanakh. But Christianity is reading the Old Testament, which is contained together with the New Testament in their Bible. So they often read Tanakh with the eyes of the New Testament, which we most certainly don't. In fact, I mentioned in the past Brevard Child's commentary on Exodus, how he distinguishes between Old Testament context and New Testament context, realizing there are different ways of reading. And, you know, Abarbanel, as other commentators as well, were certainly aware of how the Christians read the Bible. And by the way, you know, it's interesting to how they can sometimes be similar. In the past, I've pointed out, you know, the great interpretation when Moses raises his hands when they're battling Amalek. And if his arms fall, then Amalek wins, and they have to be kept up by Aaron V'chur, you know, for Israel to win. And the Mishnah says, what, you know, Moshe's hands make or break a war? No, it's that Moshe would raise his hands, and that would cause the people to look to heaven and think about their Father in heaven, who is really the one responsible. So too for the Nachash, Nachash and Nachoshet, the bronze serpent, when God punishes the people by sending fiery serpents to bite their heels as a way of curing them, Moshe is commanded to put up the Nachash Nachoshet on a standard, the bronze serpent. What's the Latin name for that? Because it's the symbol of medicine.
Caducus.
Right. But again, they respond. Was this really curing people? No. They looked up, which means they had to look up to heaven and think about it. And by the way, for the Christians, both of those things were interpreted. You know, if you got somebody up there with his arms out, or something up on a pole, that's Jesus on the cross. So, you know, they struggled with the same issues, and, you know, they tried to interpret things along different lines. Okay, who would like to go on?
I'll go on, Rabbi.
Okay, thank you.
Yet I destroyed the Amorite before them, whose stature was like the cedars. and who was stout as the oak, destroying his boughs above and his trunk below. And I brought you up from the land of Egypt and led you through the wilderness 40 years to possess the land of the Amorites. And I raised up prophets from among your sons and Nazarites from among your young men. Is that not so, O people of Israel, says Hashem? But you made the Nazarites drink wine and ordered the prophets not to prophesy.
Okay, so now we have contrast, because we talk about what Israel has done, their sins, but va'anochi, but I destroy the Ammonite. I brought you up from the land of Egypt. I raised up prophets. An emphasis there, I. This is what God has done. And we've seen this before, in prophecies, that when God is angry with the people, what does God point to? Why God is
He took them out of the land of Egypt.
right. God
He's
is
bringing that up all the time,
right.
every chapter practically.
Yeah, I mean quite a bit. That becomes, major theme within the Tanakh. But it's also that theme of you guys are a bunch of ingrates. After all that I've done for you, how
But
could
they
you
could
then?
answer, but God, what have you done for me lately?
Well, yeah, that's
Indeed.
kind of Gidon's response when
But
God
Gideon
called.
was close enough to the events he cites to make us wonder. In this case, we are not going to wonder. We're
Yeah,
centuries and centuries after the events being cited.
Yudi's point is, if you think about the lead up to the Seretati brooch, it's all what this is what I've done for you, and you better enter into this covenant.
right. But still, it's a theme that comes in the prophets, like, this is what I've done for you. And it comes again in Amos. Uh, but
But
interesting.
exactly the opposite of what? In the end of Amos, Halo Israel Halati
Yeah, we'll get to that in a moment when we get to another verse here. So again, here, look at this. I've done all this for you, and I've given you prophets, and you have people who are devoted to me, the Nazarite, the Kohen wannabe. But what you do is you distort it. You want a lot of the prophets to speak. You distort these people who are deeply, deeply committed. So there is consequence. Keep going, Charlotte.
I will slow your movements as a wagon is slowed when it is full of cut grain. Flight shall fail the swift, the strong shall find no strength, and the warrior shall not save his life. The archer shall not hold his ground, and the fleet-footed shall not escape, nor the horseman save his life. Even the most stout-hearted warrior shall run away unarmed that day, declares Hashem.
Yeah. Now, were there 8 cases there that he described?
Let's see, 1, 2, 3,
Or shall save his
4,
life? The archer, fleet-footed, the horseman.
7.
7. Okay. Yeah, maybe include
That's what
the
I can.
because I was wondering if it was that 7 plus 1. But it's like all the things that you depend on or that you think are dependable, no one's going to escape.
Hear this word, O people of Israel, that God has spoken to me.
Okay, yeah. So now here we come to a
Actually,
very
8 if you count it a little bit differently.
yeah.
Batash, V'hinei Anochi me'iktakechem shasher talika galaha mo'olam. I count that as a 1.
Yeah,
Now,
so that's one.
V'yavad banos mikal, v'chazak lo yames kochol, v'gibor lo yames nafsho. That's 3 more, making 4.
Yeah.
V'tofes hakeshet lo yamo, v'kal baraglo lo yamalei, v'rokev hasus lo yamalei nafsho.
3 more.
7. Okay, 3 more, and then beyond Mitzli Boba Giborim.
Giborim.
So
So
that's
this may also be,
7.1. That's
Uh,
8 all
sorry.
today.
yeah. So,
With
you know,
after the
this is,
8, you get Nahum Hashem. Yom Ha'hu Nahum Hashem.
yeah. So, you know, this is really a I mean, you know, very powerful rhetoric. You know, Amos is, you know, a remarkable book. You know, but even, and will come even more. So first of all,
Hear this word, O people of Israel, that God has spoken concerning you, concerning the whole family that I brought up from the lands of Egypt. You alone have I singled out of all the families of the earth. That is why I will call you to account for all your iniquities.
okay, so what is God saying here?
I brought you out from the lands of Egypt again.
Right, yeah, but what is he talking about? You know,
He picked
go ahead.
out of all the people in the world.
Yes. And therefore,
God judges us more harshly.
exactly, that, you know, you have I chosen. And because of that, you bear greater responsibility. And I'm going to judge you more harshly. And in fact, he comes back to that point at the end of his book, you know, whether that was the end, but in another prophecy where, first of all, Yehudi was mentioning it, that, you know, we normally think of Israel as being so special for taking us out of Egypt. But in the last chapter of his book begins, Halo et Israel, haleti me Eretz Mitzrayim. I took Israel out of Egypt. And Aram from Kir. You know, I also, you know, you're halochi vnei Chushima. That's the beginning of the verse. Sorry,
The Plishtim from Kaftor.
Emli.
And in that, those are the two major enemies of Israel at that point.
Right, and yet God says, you know, you were just like, you know, I'm responsible for all the world. I'm responsible for all peoples. Don't go getting cocky. And those of you who think that, oh, we're not going to be punished, the evil will not overtake us. You're not going to escape it. Yehudi?
I think one thing that has to be pointed out about Fishbane and about how Torah is in general are that the fact of the matter is that what starts chapter 3 is a complete break from the end of chapter 2. The Haftarah system tries to make it sound like it's all one big long speech, but that's definitely not the way it is in the original. It might very well have been that the speech starting in chapter 3 was made 10 years after the one made in chapter 2. And that's something you always have to be aware of when you start finding contradictions between one thing a prophet says and another. A man like almost could have been in this prophecy enterprise for 20 years, and he doesn't, you know, let's not force upon our prophets or any of our other sacred texts the hobgoblin of consistency. People change their minds as they age.
Yeah, and that's you know, a point that many biblical commentators make because, you know, in the first part of the 20th century, we were breaking up every part of the Torah. You know, we've got the four documents, JEPD, you know, and then they would break apart all kinds of different you know, verses, chapters, and, you know, many commentators today say, well, wait a minute here, you know, there may be an inner contradiction, but who said they were given at the same time, particularly when talking about prophets who are probably delivering their speeches orally? And who knows how they were preserved even. You know, we know that Yirmiyahu had a scribe.
That's probably because you didn't know how to read them right.
That's true. You know, so it's you know, and specifically when reading the prophecies, and then again when reading a haftarah, the rabbis may have been willing to say, you know, he delivered this prophecy at this time and this the prophecy at a different time, but they decided they want to include this section as the haftarah. And, you know, they pick up in the middle of stories. You know, they pick up sections that may clearly have been from different times or unconnected because they've got their own, and, you know, you
Their own
mentioned
agenda.
their own agenda. And Yehuda, you mentioned last week that we sometimes always think of the Haftarah as somehow being parallel to the Torah reading. And you pointed out, well, no, we got plenty of examples where it seems to be the opposite. And in fact, you pointed out Parashat Kedoshim, which uses the end of Amos and Amos's perspective that, just because you're chosen doesn't mean that you get out of it. So it's kind of a little bit of a contrast to Kedoshim to you. But when you really think about it, most of the Haftarot are not necessarily connected to the parasha. We have 10 Haftarot that are related to the season.
No, I meant of the thematic Haftarah.
Yeah, the thematic
We're not going to
Haftarah.
count the ones in
Right.
a lot.
But even the themes are kind of like
those are basically a different set altogether.
Right. But even the themed
the
Haftarot.
thematic ones. The Talmud barely knows about thematic ones.
Yeah.
But it certainly knows about seasonal ones, so
Yeah.
those were the first and not. That's
Right.
why to this day, if the thematic and seasonal Haftarah collide, we bump the thematic one, not the seasonal one.
Yeah. So, for example, when we are reading the Shevet Nechemta, the 7 Haftarot of consolation, following Tisha B'Av, if Rosh Chodesh falls on Shabbat, we read the Rosh Chodesh Haftarah. Now, the other Haftarah is bumped to Ki Tetzei. And
yeah, I don't mean bump like that. I mean bump in the sense that it's not read at all.
Right,
for example, next week we have Parshat Miketz.
Right.
When was the last time you heard the Haftarah of Parshat Miketz?
Right. Because it normally falls on Hanukkah.
Time you hear it? Twice in 19 years. All the other years it's bumped by Shabbos Hanukkah. What you would say, why do that? You're going to read that Haftarah anyway for Parshat Bahalotcha. But the catch is, at the time that Haftarah was assigned to Hanukkah, there were no thematic Haftarah yet. That's just the point.
Yeah,
Bumping means you don't read it. The Nechemta is an exception to that situation.
Yeah. But I think it also shows that the thematic Haftarah, if you will, because it's in keeping, although it's hard to say
that's seasonal too.
Yeah,
so
I mean,
you can't bump one seasonal over another seasonal. That's
and that's also from the second half of Isaiah, so it really does fit in with the whole theme anyway.
Exactly.
Yeah. So anyway, this whole notion of you may remember the comedy record. You don't have to be Jewish.
Oh my gosh, my grandson Moshe keeps that in his MP3. He knows them all by heart.
Yeah, I used to listen to the record, and now MP3. But there was a very good one, like I forget the guy's name, Mr. Bernstein. Comes before God and says, what would you like to know? God asks him. He said, "Is it true that we're the chosen people?" Yes, Mr. Bernstein, you are the chosen people. Well, then would you mind choosing somebody else for a change? So it's and here we have Radak trying to explain that. I thought it was an important enough point. And again, I apologize, I didn't have a chance to translate it.
I'll read it, Rabbi Poppy. Your voice is going to crack if you keep up like this.
That's all right.
Radak, רק איתכם, לפי שידעתי אתכם, ובחרתי בכם מכל עם, לפיכך אפקוד עליכם מכל עוונותיכם שאתם ראיתם, וידעתם מכל אותותיי ומופתיי. If you want to explain in English, Rabbi Poppy, you go for it.
Yeah, let me, So because I have known you, and I chose you from all peoples, therefore I will visit upon you all of your sins. For I have seen you, and I know you. No, because you have seen and have known all of the wonders and all the signs and wonders that I have done for you. Go on, Veitavti.
והיטבתי לכם, ולפיכך הדין הוא, שאבכור עליכם עוונותיכם, כי המלך יכעוס על עבדיו העומדים לפניו, ויעברו מצוותו יותר ממה שיכעס על אחרים או רחוקים ממנו.
Okay, pause there.
Okay.
Wait, pause there. Let me go back. Therefore, you've seen all the signs, and ve'itavti lachem, and how I've been good to you. Lefichach, Therefore, the judgment, no, not the judgment. It is appropriate that I will visit upon you your sins, just as the king who gets angry at his servants that stand before him. In other words, he's going to get angry at the people who are near him if they transgress his commandments more than he might be angry at others who are far from him. So basically, the people who are close by, who know him better and should know better, they're the ones who are going to be punished more harshly. Go ahead, Yehudi, toda.
Um,
Ki
okay, כי משפחת העקום, that's עובדי כוכבים ומזלות. It means
Mhm.
pagans, people who worship the sun, stars, and the constellations.
Mhm.
איננו חושש עליהם אם יטיבו או ירעו, אלא אם יהיה חמאס גדול כדור המבול, כמו שפירשנו למעלה. אבל ישראל, לפי שהם קרובים אליי, האנישים העוונם כמו שאמר בקרובי אקדש.
Yeah, for the families of the idolaters, they don't worry about these things. If it will be good or will be bad, if I'm good to them, bad to them, only if there's some great violence, like the Dora Mabul, the generation of the flood. If there's something so horrible that the world might be destroyed, they'll worry about that. Otherwise, they're not going to be concerned about the smaller sins, as we have explained above. But Israel, because they are close to me, I'm going to punish them more harshly, as it says, and this is a quote from Vayikra, Bikrovaya Kadesh, I will be made holy through those who are close to me. That's Moshe's answer or
No, that's
response, let's just say response, to the death of Aharon's sons. And there are many commentators who say, aha, they were punished more harshly because they were Kohanim, and they should have known better than to offer this Eish Zara. So, and I mean, we probably went through school hearing from our teachers that, you're the older kids, you should know better. Therefore, you're going to be punished. Okay. And here, once again, we have the 7 plus 1. Who wants to go on? Can two walk together? Anyone volunteer? Oh, Charlie, keep going. Can two walk
And
together?
two walk together without having met. Does a lion roar in the forest when it has no prey? Does a great beast let out a cry from its den without having made a capture? Does a bird drop on the ground in a trap with no snare there? Does a trap spring up from the ground unless it has caught something? When a ram's horn is sounded in a town, do the people not take alarm? Can misfortune come to a town if Hashem has not caused it?
Yeah, so again, that's 7 plus 1 building up. Things don't just happen. God is responsible. And certainly if people sin, if something bad happens, God is taking note. And then that also is a message for the prophet. Go ahead.
Indeed, my sovereign Hashem does nothing without having revealed the purpose to God's servants, the prophets. A lion has roared, but who can fear? My sovereign God has spoken, but who can prophesy?
Who can but prophesy? So, the
Prophesy.
prophet is saying that you may not like hearing this, but I have no choice. God has spoken. And again, the notion of God as a lion roaring, but it's and again, it's kind of a contrast between what he said before. You're telling the prophets don't prophesy. But sorry, we don't have a choice. And you have to realize that there are consequences to the actions. And hence, al shosha pishe whoever valar ba'alo ashivenu. God is going to respond to the evil that is committed. So very short but powerful, wonderful haftarah here. So thank you all very much.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Wish everybody Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Stay warm.
Yes.